All right, so today's definitely, probably the easiest lecture. We're just basically an extension of what we talked about last week, where we're going over the tools that we're using and just making sure everybody's on the same page so we can all make things. So this week is all about assets and the asset pipeline. So when we build things in games, most of the time, things in those games are not all made in Unity. So when you make some 2D art for an animation or a 3D model or some music, that stuff's not actually made in Unity. It's made in a special tool that's designed to make those things. But we need to understand the process for getting those assets from those external tools into Unity. And so an asset is just anything that basically just takes information that describes your game world. And most of the time, it's going to be something that's built outside of Unity. There's a couple things you can't make in Unity. So just for my, honestly, just interest, how many of you know how to use like an image manipulation program? Like if I asked you to make a smiley face, like a 64 pixel by 64 pixel smiley face with transparent background, raise your hand, say yes if you could do that, and no if you don't know how to do that. Yeah, anything. Just I need a 64 by 64 pixels image, and I need to put it in my game. And it just needs to be a PNG. All right. Well, I'm noticing at least one no, which means that we do have to talk about it. So I'll just go over quickly GIMP, which is a free image manipulation program that anybody can download. And we'll just go over quickly how to just make something for that, because most of you are going to be doing 2D games, I hope, for your project, because they are much easier to build 2D games than 3D games, because 3D games require all this effort in building out the materials, and building models takes much more time, at least detailed ones, than 2D art. So hopefully most of you will be thinking smaller scope and be thinking 2D. Obviously, we support you if you want to try to do 3D, but we're not going to be teaching you how to do 3D modeling or anything like that in this actual course, though we're going to do that in special lectures. And of course, the GCS community will support you in anything you want to do. So let me just share my screens. All right, so I've got a basic Unity project up. Let me get GIMP open. So here's my GIMP. Let me link it to everybody. So if you don't have it and you want to follow along, you can. Yeah, definitely. So everybody can see what's going on. All right, so if you needed GIMP, hopefully it's downloaded by now. If it's installing, you want me to slow down, just let me know in the chat. Otherwise, we'll just move on. We'll talk about how GIMP works. So GIMP is just an image manipulation program. It's for generating and modifying images. So one important thing to note, if you never used an image manipulation program before, is that all images are stored in perfect rectangles. So there's no way to store an image outside of just how wide is it and how tall it is. So if we want to get something into Unity that's a more interesting shape, like a circle or a star or something, we basically take advantage of the alpha channel in an image. So there's RGBA in an image. Don't have to worry, this is like technical stuff, but we can basically make any pixel transparent. So when it goes into Unity, it's just invisible. And so that way we can do things like the smiley face where all these checkerboard pixels are transparent. They're not visible. If I bring these into Unity, you won't see them, and you can get any shape you want inside of the rectangle. So let me go over how to make something like this. So if you open up GIMP, you won't see anything at first. You're going to have no image. So you'll do File, New at the top, and you want to figure out how big you want the image to be. So if you're doing pixel art, it's probably going to be pretty small, 64 by 64. Usually people do powers of 2 because it's nice. There's no real reason to do it like that. Just people do it. I'm sure there's like, it's just like slightly computationally faster or something to do it that way, but it doesn't matter. If you do something a little bit larger, you're going to be dealing with a different style of image editing. So let me do some really simple pixel art. So we'll do 64 by 64. So I just did a new 64 by 64. There's actually something I forgot to do. So let me start over. So we'll do 64 by 64. And we want to make it so that the default for all the pixels is that they're invisible. That way, when we want to make something that's like smaller than the rectangle, we don't have to set those pixels to invisible. They just default to invisible. So we'll do advanced options. And then where it says fill width, we can just do transparency. So now the whole image is this. This is like the universal way to say transparent, nothing there, which is this checkerboard. So there's nothing here right now. It's just a blank image. And let's say I want to do a really simple character. So in GIMP, it's kind of like an emulation of like a paint board. You have a pencil and a paintbrush. That's the way it is in most image manipulation tools. So I'll go on the side here on the top left. This is my toolbar where all the tools are. And I'll click the one that looks like a paintbrush. Now, if I click it, you'll see the options on the left side change. Those are all the settings for the specific tool that I'm using at the current time. And the color right here is just the color that I'm going to actually be painting with. So we're not going to do anything fancy. I'm just going to make a yellow smiley face that's pretty low res. So I'm going to keep this yellow. If you want to change it, you can click it. It's just a standard color picker. And we'll do like a smiley face. So I'll just draw a circle like this. And then let's give it like eyes and smile. So now I've got an image. I've just done that with the paintbrush, and like 20 seconds, I've got a decent asset that I can put into Unity. So if we want to, okay, sounds good. So we got some people installing, that's fine. So we're not gonna go too deep into how to actually use GIMP because there's a million better ways to teach you how to use GIMP than me like just walking you through all the tools right now. But the basic idea is you have an image that's a width and a height, and you fill those pixels in with whatever you want. And so the more important part is how do we get this into Unity and how do we use it in our games? So now that we have our image, let's just say this is my beautiful masterpiece that I've made in pixel art and it looks amazing. I want to get this into Unity. So the first thing I want to do, we're talking about, okay, yeah, 100% right. So the first thing I want to do is File, Save. So everything in the gaming world has, in terms of assets, has two different file types. There's the file type that you save, that when you hit Control S, would actually get saved as, and then there's what you export as. So what you save as holds all the extra information for when you're manipulating the program. So like the layers, all the useful stuff that you set up in the program, but doesn't actually have to do with the image itself. So I can't think of a universal example, but like in an image manipulation tool, you have things like layers, groups, your default palette. So all these things you set up in the file, but when you export them, you don't want that extra information being into your game because all you care about is the image. So when you hit Control S, you get this XCF file type, which is GIMP's file type. With Photoshop, it's PSD. And this is just my save file. So I'll call it whatever, I will do smiley. Now, where do I save it? This is just the way I like to do things. I like to have a folder in the root of my Unity project called saves, where I put everything that is a save file. So that's my blend files for Blender, Photoshop files, PSD, anything from GIMP. That way it's all stored in the same project. So if I'm using Git or something to replicate it, everyone also gets those files, and it's just everything's kept track of. So let me go find my So this is my Stuco Unity game project. Make a new folder, saves, and then I'll save it in there. So now the file itself is saved, so I can reopen this if I wanted to later. But if I want to get this into Unity, I don't want the XCF file. I don't want the GIMP file. I want just a PNG. I want an image. So to get that, you do file export. And this is how it works in pretty much every program like this, not just image files. For sound, for 3D models, you have your file save and your file export. So now at the top, you'll see I'm not doing an XCF file. I'm doing a PNG file. So I've got the real stuff. So I'm going to put this in my assets folder in Unity because that's where all the assets go. Now, we'll do it later. We'll probably want to organize this a little bit better. You probably just don't want to dump everything into the root. So you want your other people working on your product to be able to tell where to find things, and for yourself, not having to look up everything. You want to just be able to know where everything is. But for now, I'll just export it to the root. And there's a bunch of settings here. You don't really have to worry about them for Unity. Yeah, you just hit export. Now I've exported it. Now there's a file in my assets folder. So anything that changes in your assets folder, Unity automatically picks that up and will re-import stuff. So when I just open up Unity, you'll see my smileys down here in the projects section. So you'll notice though, that the transparency is coming up as black. It's not coming up as the checkerboard. And if I just drag this into my scene, so right now it's just a PNG right now, but I can drag it into my, can I? Well, I can't because it's not set to a sprite yet. We'll do that in a second. So if I click on it, you'll see on the top right in the inspector, all the information about this file comes up. And I basically, in this panel, can tell Unity how to interpret this file. So right now, it's being interpreted as a texture, which is not what we want, because a texture is for basically for 3D stuff. And we'll go into more details about materials and stuff towards the end of the lecture. But for now, I just want this to be a 2D sprite that gets rendered into my game. So I don't care about textures or materials or specular maps or anything like that. I just want to make this a sprite. So when I change texture type at the top, I want to change that to sprite 2D in UI. So when I click that, I'm going to scroll down and hit apply. You'll notice that it now picks up my transparency because that's the default setting for sprites. So that's all you really have to do for the basics. And now that it's a sprite, you'll see this little drop down on the as appeared underneath the file in Unity. That's basically the sprite information that Unity automatically generates so that it can just generate the sprite. So information about what the center of the image is and like how wide it is so it can render it properly. But now that this arrow is here, it means that it's been recognized by Unity and it's interpreting it properly. So I can now just drag this into the game and I've got my image in the game now. So it's in some ridiculous position. So I'll reset the transforms to the center. So now if I go into my game, there we go. So now I can see my sprite. How we actually do anything interesting with it, we'll talk about next week when we talk about coding. But for now, just enjoy that we have gone from GIMP to Unity, and we can now paint our camera with whatever we want. So let me just bring this real close to the camera. That's the whole thing. There we go. So that's all there really is to it for basically getting a sprite in. Now there's a bunch of stuff we can do for changing slightly the quality and how we want to use this image. So if this really was pixel art, so let me go back into GIMP and make something a little more pixel arty. So let me do something even lower resolution. I'll do like 16 by 16. Forgot to do the transparency thing. Fill with transparency. Okay. So I'm just going to make a sword. So I'll do gray, paintbrush. Now, you'll notice with the paintbrush, I get this kind of, it's like not fully transparent. It's not fully opaque. I'm getting sort of like it's like a real paintbrush where the sides of it kind of blurred, it's feathered out. For pixel art, you don't usually want that. For pixel art, you want these discrete pixels, and you want to be able to set every pixel exactly how you want it. So you don't really want the paintbrush tool. So I'm actually going to go to the eraser tool and get rid of this. What's better for pixel art is the pencil tool, because the pencil tool lets you edit just each pixel exactly as it is. And you don't have to worry about blurring other pixels around it and messing with the surroundings. So I'll go to pencil and then set my size on the left here to 1. So now it's a pencil that's only editing 1 pixel, and whatever color I set it to is the color I'm going to get. So I'm going to make it kind of silvery. that. Maybe a darker bottom. And then get like a nice golden hilt. Like that. And maybe like a green gem in the middle. There we go. So there's my sword. Make it a little wider too. So there's my sword. I'm going to save it, sword. And you notice when I hit Control S, it goes right to where I save the other thing. So it's super convenient. And so everything's now staying in that saves folder and kept track of. It's also kind of off center, which is bothering me, but that's fine because it's all transparency. So now I'm going to export, put it in my assets folder, and let me just organize this a little bit. So in my assets folder, I want to let people know who's working on this product, where these files are going. So I'll call this sprites. And then maybe I'll make another folder called weapons, right? So if I'm making a big game, I don't want to just have all the sprites in one folder. I may want to even organize that even further. So make it weapons folder and I'll put that in there. And now when I go into Unity, you'll see my folders are here, sprites, weapons, sword. Now, the texture type is still set to default. So we want to set that to sprite so we get our transparency and that Unity interprets it properly as a sprite. Hit apply. You always have to hit apply. It'll warn you if you try to do anything else while that stuff is set and not saved. It'll tell you it's not applied. Do you want to apply to revert it? So I'll just hit apply. And then I'll drag it in. And now I've got a sword. Now there's something you'll notice about this sword, which when I zoom in really close, it looks like trash. That does not look like, it doesn't look good at all. So when I look at my game, let me try to get my camera closer to the origin so I can actually see. There. And let me set the skybox is annoying because we want to make a 2D game, right? What do we need a skybox for? So in the camera settings, I'll just set the solid color and make it black. So this looks terrible. This doesn't look like a good sword at all. I want my nice pixel art game to have these crisp, discrete pixels. So that's actually not a problem with GIMP or anything. That's just a problem with how Unity is interpreting this image. So there's this thing called, where is it? Filter mode. So what filter mode is basically doing is it's telling the camera, when I query a pixel on the screen, how do I actually get the pixel in the image? Because obviously the resolution of the screen is different from the resolution of the image. So it needs some way to figure out what I'm actually going to render at each pixel. By default, it's going to take an average of the pixels around where it's querying. So that's why you're getting this blurring effect, because right here, there's that yellow pixel, but because it's taking that average, it's getting the average of the gray around it. And you're getting this blurring effect between. So forget about that. We don't want that. Now that's good for like a high resolution image, right? Because you don't want to zoom in really close and get pixelated. If you want to blow up like a really high, nice looking image, if you blow it up, you want to get a kind of blurring effect because you won't notice it much. But with a pixel art, you get these really discrete colors, these sharp shadows that you want to show that to the player. You don't want to hide that. So to fix that, we'll just change our filter mode to no filter. And now it's just going to directly get whatever pixel the camera hits. And so now you get some better looking pixel art, but it still looks weird. What's going on there? Is it backwards or something? Oh, I know exactly what it is. Okay, so there's another layer of this, which is something that happened in the last couple versions of Unity, which is now there's a default compression on all the images. So compression is actually also distorting this very low resolution image, because Unity is trying to compress an image that has already very little information to begin with. So when it compresses it even further, you're getting basically nothing. And obviously for a 16 by 16 pixel image, you don't need compression. You don't need to make it smaller. So we'll just turn off compression and there we go. So now we get exactly how I saw it in GIMP. And that's how you make pixel art. But not all your art may be pixel art. So for that stuff, don't do that stuff. Just leave it the defaults. Because the defaults is really good for normal, high resolution, like kind of paintbrush type imagery. Okay, so that's pretty much all the basics for getting images into Unity. If you want to actually get them into working game objects, there's two ways you can get an image into working game object. You can do it as a sprite. So there's this component called the sprite renderer in Unity, which will just take any transform and wherever that transform is, render a sprite there. But you can also use Unity's UI system. So if I go on the right here and I click UI canvas, that's going to create kind of another camera that's going to be rendered on top of everything, where all the UI menu stuff is going to go. So I could also take my sword, I could add to this canvas, right click UI image. And this is actually totally different from a sprite renderer. This is just an image renderer, and it's hooked into Unity's UI system. So it's kind of like, if you've any experience web development, it's kind of got like this CSS type like layout system to it, where you can anchor certain things and make it so that no matter how the screen stretches and shrinks, the UI still looks good. So if your image is going to go onto your UI, or it's going to always be on top like it's a HUD or something, then this is the system you want to use. You don't want to use sprite renderers, because this is a lot more robust. So in the image component, there's a field which is just takes in a sprite. So I can click this and it'll show me all the sprites that are currently in my project. The 2 that I imported plus a bunch of default ones, which I don't really know why those are still in there. They've been there since like 2016. But I'll select the sword one. And now, if I zoom out, so there we go. So now I've got a sword in the middle of this gray box, which is actually totally unconnected to the actual 3D game world. This is its own world space. So this rectangle is basically being painted on top of the camera. So when I go back to the game, you'll see they're kind of on top of each other. So let me turn off my sprite rendered sword. So this is being rendered with the UI. So it's the same idea. It's just a sprite being rendered somewhere on the image, somewhere on the screen, and it's there. So when we do our actual full UI lecture, we'll talk about the advantages and stuff, the kind of interesting stuff you can do with the UI system. But for now, just understand that if you want to put sprites in the game world, as they want to exist physically in the game world, you probably just want to use regular sprites. But if you want to put things in such a way like a HUD or a pause menu, or I don't know, other things that might require the UI system, where you want to really keep everything structured and make sure it all looks good in all resolutions, and it's not moving around a lot. Like if this was a character, my sword was a character and it was sliding around, you wouldn't want to use the UI system. So just 2 things. Your default should probably just be stick with sprite render. But all right, so what else can we talk about? So in the sprite render, there's other things you can do. There's a neat trick I like to do with stuff that's going to be different colors. Rather than making things 7 different colors, what I can do is I can just distort the color with the color fill in the sprite render. And it's basically just going to add that color on top of whatever's there. So if you want something to change color, what you can do is make something completely white. So like if I make, let me just add a little bit to the image. I like this square here. And then export it again. Now, whatever I make this color is what's that color, that white square is going to be. So if you had like a, I don't know, like a hit marker or something that you wanted to control the color of, rather than just painting the color in GIMP, it's better to actually rely on Unity system. That way you can change it easily here to make less work for yourself. So that's all there is for image manipulation. If there's anything else you wanted me to talk about, or questions, I'll give like 5 minutes to cool down a bit, and then we'll go into audio manipulation, which I imagine less of you have experience with. Can I get a poll there too? If I asked all of you to like take an audio clip and, I don't know, slow it down and pitch it up or something, how many of you would be able to do that? Just do a yes or no. Low turnout. That's 25% no. That's better than what we had before. Oh, it's 40% no now. So yeah, so that's definitely not as common of a skill. So make sure I'm not missing anything critical. Yeah, so there's also animation, but we'll do that at the end. So let's do audio real quick. So audio works the same exact way in terms of how you integrate it into Unity. Let me get Audition open. Actually, no, we want to use Audacity. Nobody has Audition. So Audacity is kind of the GIMP of sound, or at least the one that I know of the most. There's probably another good one. Audacity is pretty old. But Audacity is free, and it lets you do simple stuff like trim audio, stretch it, pitch it down, pitch it up. If you want to make like really complicated stuff like sound effects, Audacity is probably not the best. It's got a pretty old interface, but it's just the only one that I know that's completely free and has a lot of good resources on. So, Woody, do you mind finding that that online sound effect generator thing that we always link? Yeah, thank you. So let's just go over something simple. So let me download, get a good sound file, and then I'll send it to you. So everybody, let me link Audacity for you. Is that true? That's pretty cool. I didn't know that. Awesome. So for those of you who are new to the world of making your own audio stuff, there's this thing that some genius invented. Sorry, my firefighter thing is going off. It goes off every night at 7:35 and 7:45, and it gets very loud in about a second. So we'll just relax and enjoy the silence for a couple minutes, a couple seconds. I'll take that. Okay, so what he just linked is probably the coolest audio thing I've ever seen. It is really, really cool to learn the fundamentals of what makes audio sound differently, and like how do you emulate different types of audio, like how does when audio is playing behind a wall or something, what's actually happening physically to the waveform that makes it sound like that, and then how can you replicate it in a game? All this really cool stuff. So if you're interested in audio sound effects, I definitely recommend that. And then there's also there's that one that Tom Corbett always links, which is like the that's how to make like the 8-bit sound effects. If you know that, Woody, whatever. We'll talk about later. So
is this the? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I would say I don't remember the name of it. Is it the one that makes really quick synth sounds for like game jams and stuff?
Yeah, that one.
Cool. I'll try to find that one too.
Cool. All right. So what was I talking about before? Okay. So before my thing went off, the thing that's really cool that literally I don't know how anyone lives without now is YouTube to MP3. All right. This is the greatest. This is a masterpiece of software. Basically, take a YouTube video and download it, and that's what 90% of your audio assets are probably going to be. Makes life a lot easier, but the problem is that you don't have control, right? So if you want a gunshot sound, most of the time on YouTube, they're going to be like stock gunshot sounds. It's like 20 gunshot sounds in like a 5-minute video, which is obviously not what you want. If you have a character that's shooting a gun, you just want that, half a second clip of the gunshot sound. So the most common thing for new game developers is taking Audacity and cutting out the specific part of the YouTube video that you want and exporting it to Unity. The thing we just linked in the chat is another really good way to generate your own sound effects. They're all kind of like super 8-bitty, old-fashioned stuff. Probably takes a certain genre to work with that kind of sound effect. That's another good resource. So we'll just do really quick. Just pick a YouTube video that you want, plug it into YouTube to MP3. Is that illegal? Am I encouraging illegal activity? I don't know, but I guess nothing that's copyright. Who cares? But so just pick a YouTube video and put it into YouTube MP3, download it, and then drag it on Audacity. So the one most of the time it's just, if you take the one that's the top of Google, you're not going to get scammed. There's also a really good Google. If you use Chromium, there's a plugin that will just put a little box next to all YouTube videos that if you click will give you just an MP3. But that's like super safe, and most of the time you can. I don't know. I guess I can't say I've never ever gotten a virus from anything like this. But yeah, I mean you're fine. It's a pretty common tool, and I'll link the one that I just used. I definitely know this one's not a virus, so maybe just always use that one and you'll be good. But I recommend that. Let me find that plugin. This is the one I've installed. It actually works with any videos on any website, not just YouTube. And that's a super quick way to just, okay, I need a gunshot, I need a jump sound, I need a swoosh sound for my sword. Let me just look it up, download it, splice it. Because most of these game jams or stuff like this setting, then we're not going to ask you to like hold the copyright law and stuff like that. So you can just grab whatever is useful to you, and as long as you can make it work in your game, then it's good. But obviously, this would not work in like an industry setting. You have to buy the rights for stuff. All right, so hopefully everybody's in a setup that they are comfortable with. Do another minute or so. But super simple. We'll just splice it. Maybe we'll do a pitch down or something, and then we'll export it. Okay, so now that you have your audio in Audacity, you're going to see this bar. So this is the way it works in pretty much all audio editing tools. You've got tracks, and you can put sounds on multiple tracks, and they'll layer on top of each other. But for now, we're just dealing with one track, one sound that we actually want to cut down. So we want to remove stuff. So what I've got is a bunch of stock gunshot sound effects. And so what I would do is if I was a developer and I wanted to get like a shotgun sound, I would scroll through, I'd listen to all these till I found one that I really liked. Then I would cut out, and I can tell, I mean, given that these are gunshots, you can look at the waveform here. The height of the wave is the volume. So you can kind of see, these are spikes in volume, which look like what gunshots look like. So I would, maybe this one is the one I like. Hopefully you can't hear that because I would blow your ears out. And then I would take that and I would take all the stuff that's not it. So I would click and drag right to the left of it and select everything that's before it and then hit delete. And then I would click and drag everything after it and hit delete. Now I've got a pretty good sound, but there's still a problem with this, which is that if I were to trigger this sound on an event, like on a mouse click, there's going to be this slight delay because I haven't perfectly trimmed it. So with time-sensitive sound effects, you want to be careful and make sure that you really cut down the front of that wave. So otherwise you'll get a kind of delay sound and you won't want, does not sound good. So I can hit Control and scroll on Audacity to zoom in and get closer on the waveform. And I can see there's all this extra sound at the beginning. So I want to grab just before the waveform actually starts. Pause, and then you can test it by just hitting play, and that's how long you actually have. And there's the other 745 long. Okay, that one's a bit shorter. So now that I'm happy with this audio clip, there's a bunch of things I can do. So we can jump right into exporting it, which is probably the more important part, but just for fun, we'll do an effect on it. So let's make it super high pitch. So if we go to effects on the top, and well, first we want to select something. So we'll grab this effect. Select a, shoot. Forgot how to do this. Because I'm in the middle of play mode. That's why. Okay. So make sure you're not in play mode. Hit the square to pause everything. And so I can. These are all just a bunch of effects. So let's say I want to pitch things up. So I want to take the change pitch effect, and then basically I just say this is going to go from this note to this note is what this is saying. So I just want to change it up, maybe 2 notes, and I can also just change directly the frequency change. But I don't want to change it too much. I'll just do like 30% higher pitch. Okay, then you can listen to it and you'll hear that difference. And so there's a bunch of stuff you can do. The really cool one that I use a lot is the equalizer, which lets you do like I would say like most game effects come from just taking a sound and throwing in an equalizer. So something like a gunshot, if you take a microwave closing sound, put it in an equalizer, you can make a gunshot out of it. Because all you have to do is make the high pitch sounds really high and the low pitch sounds really low, or the other way around, and you can get all sorts of cool sounds. So it's like something, for example, you could take a music, take any music and make it sound like it's coming from an old radio by getting rid of the highs and lows. Or you can make it sound like it's coming out of a walkie-talkie by just, getting rid of the highs and lows, because a low fidelity speaker can't produce high and low frequencies because it's a low fidelity speaker. So I recommend, if this stuff interests you, if you're interested in sound design or music design, just take a sound effect and mess around with this and see what the stuff it does. And you can get really far with just one sound, and you can make like a whole game out of one sound and an equalizer. Okay, so now that we've done our thing, we'll do our classic Control-S to give us a save. I think Audacity does it save it as an Audacity file? Yeah, so it has an Audacity file, which is AUP. It's funny, this is I guess this is ASMR, gunshot ASMR, interesting. Could do this, and then this, I think. Is it? This, right? Oh, I don't know what I'm doing. All right, so I'll just save it somewhere, who cares? And then we'll do File, Export Audio. And put it into wherever our thing is. So I have to find out where it is. So in project, if you want to figure out where your project files are, you can always just right click on the project and do Show and Explore, and that'll open it up in Windows. And now you know exactly where you are. So I can just grab all this, copy it, and then paste it into I can't paste it. That's so stupid. That's how you know this is old tech, because new tech you'd be able to do that. All right, so I'll just go into, there we go. Okay. So LD20 is where I put all my game stuff, Stuco. Okay. So now I've figured out where I am. So then I'll go to assets, and now this is in 2D, this is audio. So we want to do create new folder, audio. I'll just dump it in there. Maybe I'd make a weapons folder or something, but we'll just leave it like that. And now .wav is the most common format. You can mess around with this if you want. You can make it other formats, but .wav is plenty fine. It'll run on most OSs. I'll just hit save. And now this is kind of interesting. You can, all WAV files and MP3 files, they're tagged with like the artist and the album and stuff like that. So things like Spotify can automatically generate like album covers and stuff for it. But obviously this is just a sound effect, so you don't need to care about that. But if you wanted to, you could set like a track name and then an artist name and stuff like that. Okay, and now we'll go in, now it's exported. So now we go back to our Unity and go to audio and then gunshot, and you'll see it's there. And you get a little preview of the waveform down here. You can actually hear it if you click here. And you'll get an audio preview of it. And in terms of audio, there's really not much to mess around in the import settings. It's all pretty much the same. But if I wanted to, I could drag this audio file and drag it into my world, and that'll automatically generate an audio source for me, which will play that audio in the game. And now here I've got a bunch of settings. So I can mess with the pitch, I can mess with the volume, I can make it loop, I can set it so it automatically plays when the game starts or not. And all this can be integrated with code. So next time we'll talk about actually integrating these components with code. But the idea is you would take this gunshot and then you would like activate it with a script. So you would have like an on mouse down, and then you would activate this audio source and it would play and then it would stop. But for our presentation purposes, we can't actually do that because we haven't shown you guys how to code in Unity yet. So I'll just do play on awake. And if you want to test it, if you play your game, you should have the sound effect. And I definitely mess around with these settings a little bit, just see how you can get things to sound. You can do the same thing. You don't necessarily have to drag it in. You can just create an empty game object, add an audio source to it, just like you can with a sprite renderer, and then pick the sound that way. There's also, Unity has some really cool 3D sound stuff where the location of this audio source relative to the camera will actually determine how you hear it in your left ear and right ear. So that's some interesting stuff. But in 2D, you probably want that off. So you would have like this whole reverb zones, spatial blend stuff, which is that feeling of like blending it into 3D space. You can turn that on and off. But definitely play around with it. And if you've done all that, then that is pretty much all there is to know for importing audio and visual stuff into Unity. The last thing we have time, which I guess we do, right? We're less than an hour in. Is I'll go over how to make animations with 2D sprites. So the lecture, after next lecture, we'll do a full lecture on animation, but just to show you like what are the things you do in the image editor and what you do in the Unity editor. If you don't know, the way you make animations in 2D is basically you just make a series of images and they play one after another. Now you could do that by making every single image its own image. So say you had a walk cycle, right? You could make a walk like this, an image like this, then like this, and like this. Export all 3 of those, then write some code to play them in sequence. What's much easier is to take one big image file and basically make it a grid of different sprites. And that's called a sprite sheet. So let me send you an example of that. Here's an example of a really big one. So this is a animated horse that's got a side-to-side walk cycle, a down walk cycle, and then all these kind of diagonal walk cycles for like an isometric 3D game or 2D game. So this is an example. This is what you would look like. If I wanted to make this in GIMP, it's just kind of exactly how it sounds. I would take, say I want to animate the sword. I would take whatever the size of the sword is, and then multiply the size of that image by how many frames I want in my animation. So if I get a 16 by 16 image, and I want to make it 4 frames, then I can actually just type I don't have to do the math. I can just do 16 times 4 into this, and then hit OK, and it'll make me my spreadsheet. And once again, I forgot to set the transparency. There we go. And now there's some tricky stuff with like setting the grid. I can do show grid, and now that'll show me the size of the image. But I've only got it configured in a certain way that it does multiples of 16. By default, you're probably gonna get like multiples of 10. So just something to keep in mind. There's no good way to like separate out the different sprites in your sprite sheet in GIMP. You kind of just have to manipulate the grid so it's useful for you. But now, so I would do something like, let's make a spinning plus sign, something really simple. So here's plus, here's that at like a slight angle, and then here's that again, and then here's another slight angle. So I play this in a sequence that'll look like something that's spinning. So I'll export this. Okay, got my spinning star, put that into sprite. Now I need to tell Unity that this is not actually one sprite. I need to tell Unity that this is 4 different sprites packaged into one. The way we do that is we set the sprite mode to multiple. Pretty straightforward. And now I go into the Unity Special Sprite Editor, which you might not actually have by default. So you'll see I don't actually have this by default, because not all Unity products are equipped to do fancy 2D editing, because not every Unity product is a 2D game. So if you want to do this, let me just make sure everyone's up to speed. I know I'm going a little quick at the end here, but if anyone's missed what I said, let's address that before we go into adding this package. So give me 30 seconds or so. All right. So when I want to add a new package, so normally you don't have to do this, and you shouldn't have to run through this too many times, because there's not many things you'll be doing over the course of this course that will require you to add multiple packages or new packages outside of Unity. This is really the only one. And if you set your Unity project to be specific, like explicitly a 2D Unity project at the beginning, you wouldn't have to do this. But if you just set it to default, it's going to make you download it. So you go to Window Package Manager, and then set packages to just the Unity registry. So it's just the registry of all the packages, and it'll just list all the packages that are available for free. You can actually add more. There's a whole like community around building packages for Unity, and I won't go too deep into it, but you can add things to this if you wanted to. But the 2D sprite, 2D sprite editor is just a default one. I click it and then hit install, and it'll do everything for me. And now when I go into the sprite editor, I'll get a nice window. And I'll basically be able to tell Unity, here's where each sprite starts and ends. So if I go back into my spinning star and I go to sprite editor, it's now showing me my sprite, and I'm going to go to slice at the top here. So I'm going to slice this into multiple sprites, and we'll do by cell size. So each cell is like one of my sprites, and I want to tell it how big that cell is, and it'll automatically calculate how to cut each one up into cells. So my cell size is 16 by 16, and if I hit slice, it'll then show me some borders between each sprite. And now if I hit apply, I've got 4 different sprites. And actually I can click these, I can edit the boundaries of each one. And now these are cut into just 4 different sprites. So I sliced it, just automatic cell size, just told it how big the sprites were. And now when I go back into here, you'll see it's now got 4 different sprites. If I hit the drop down, it's split it up into 4 different sprites. And when I drag this in, it's only going to show one of them at a time. So let me actually, so there's one thing I forgot to do, which was to set the filter mode to none to get it to a nice crisp pixel arty look. And what I want to do is, rather than, okay, so So rather than just bring out one sprite, because right now if I drag it into the scene by default, it's just going to give me the first sprite in the list. So it's just giving me one sprite, and it's just the 0, 1. So I want to make actually an animation out of this. Now, it used to be a lot harder to do this. Now it's super, super simple. Once you have an asset that has this multiple sprites listed underneath it, you can just select all of them. So just click one and then shift click to select all of them. And then drag them all simultaneously into your scene. And that will actually open a folder, a window that says create new animation. And I'm just going to name it like star spinning, hit save. Now I've got 2 new files in here. One's an animator controller, which we'll talk about later, and one's an animation. So all we care about is the animation for now. So if I take this, one and I added it, so now, okay, perfect. So now that I've done that, it's actually created a new sprite with an animator component on it. Now, it's done a lot of stuff for you. Normally you'd have to do this yourself, but I'll just go over what the animator does. The animator basically takes animations and puts them on objects. So it takes a controller, which is a little complicated. We won't go over into what that is. But for now, just know that this is a controller with one animation in it. And that one animation is that animation we just made. And that's actually the default animation. So it's going to open up and just run that animation. And if you click on the animation itself in the product folder, you got some settings. You can tell it whether to loop or not, certain configuration with looping. But all that really matters is whether we want it to loop or not. And since it's spinning, yeah, I like it to loop. So we've got our spinning star with the animator controller on it and the one animation on it. And by default, it's going to open up with that animation. So if I hit play right now, it's going to actually just play that animation for me. So now I've got a spinning animation. And there we go. So yeah, if there's anything that was confusing there, just slow me down and I'll clarify, but that's pretty much everything. Just importing audio, importing sounds, and importing audio, importing sprites, and importing sprite sheets. So for your assignment, all you have to do, obviously with a screenshot, you can't share sound. We would like you to, do some sound editing. That would be nice. So if if you're feeling particularly motivated, I encourage you to upload like a sound file or something. But all we'll ask is, take a sprite, something that you made yourself or download it from the internet and edit it, put it into something in Unity, something interesting, and send us a screenshot. But that's all. Enjoy the rest of your week. Yeah, just import some asset into Unity. It can either be a sprite, a sound, or a sprite sheet. And put it into your scene. If you want to, if you can, make it something interesting, something that could be interpreted as a scene of something happening, and just send us a screenshot. And Woody, that is totally new information to me, by the way. That's very useful.
Yeah, that's the Game Jam Once a Video in 10 Minutes classic.
I will definitely be using that for GDPP. So you're saying you want to remove it and make it transparent. Gotcha. Okay, so this is a common thing. So let's say, let me just get an example one. This is super common. When you download things from the internet, a lot of times we end up downloading something that has like a pure white background. When we put that into Unity, we get a pure white background or object, but we want it to have a nice smooth outline. So what we can do is when we bring this into Unity, or into GIMP, sorry. Oh, I can just do this. All right, so downloads. Here. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so I've got this gun, right? And I want to get rid of the outline on it. And I want to bring it into Unity. So what do? All we really have to do is select this stuff that's white and see. So this lasso tool at the top will let you select things. So see, it's kind of like a lasso symbol, like a cowboy lasso. When you click and drag, you basically select the things that are behind it. So I'm going to click and drag, kind of outline this whole shape. I'm going to go around. Yeah, we'll do the wand tool in a second. Let me just see if I can get this to work. So this is the dumb way to do it. This is like the hand way to do it, because the wand tool sometimes doesn't work depending on the outline. So this is like the brute force way to do it, is to close the loop. And now everything inside of this is selected, but we want to delete everything outside. So what I can do is select and then invert. And that'll select everything outside of it and then hit delete. And that'll fill whatever the background is. But the problem is your background right now is just like a green what? You want your background to be transparent. So what I'll do is layer, new layer, and then fill with transparency and put that behind my, my layer. So now when I delete this, it'll just delete what's already on the layer and show me what's on the layer behind it. So when I hit delete now, oh, my bad. That was the Photoshop way to do it. The way to do it in GIMP is to right click the layer and just do add alpha channel. And now you have transparency. When you hit delete, you'll get transparency. Much easier. So that's like the brute forcey way to do it. The better way to do it, as Woody pointed out, is to use this thing called the wand tool, which is, it's like the, I forget what it's called in Photoshop, but basically you click and it selects everything that's the same color as it. And then I can it'll fill out everything that's the same color. So when I click in the white space and I hit delete, it just kind of magically does it for me. But as you can tell, especially with high resolution images, you get like, it's kind of, bad looking stuff. So you'll have to go in manually, probably with the eraser tool, and clean that up yourself. But the wand tool, let me just go back to how it was before and just show you how useful the wand tool is. If I just click out here, it actually does that and delete. Let me add my alpha channel. So just click, delete, and it just did it for me. But you can tell there's a little bit of an outline because it's technically, it's got a little bit of a boundary. So I can actually configure the wand tool with this threshold over here, and then I'll make it more strict or less strict with what it considers part of its like color space. So if I decrease the threshold, that'll make it like more willing to give up space. So you'll get even wider borders. But if I want to make it less strict, I'll just do like 25 or something, select it. And now it got a little bit closer. It's a little hard to tell because there's still a border there, but it's much closer than it was before. And I can put this to this. And then if I set the threshold to 255, then it's just take everything and I just end up selecting the whole image. But if I put it to like, maybe, I don't know, 130 or something, now you'll see it actually selected inside the gun a little bit. So if I hit delete, I'm actually getting pieces of the gun too. But you can mess with this until you get, that looks pretty good. There we go. So now I've got just the gun. Okay. Okay, so Sophia asks, how can you go over uploading a PNG to Unity again? For sure. So if I go into Unity and I find the PNG that I want. This is actually technically a JPEG, but it works the same way, which is, actually, let me get it. This is a shoe. So if I've got like a shoe image in my folder explorer, I just drag that image over into the project section of Unity. So where all the files are, I just drag it into there. And that's how you import anything, not just a PNG. Anything that you want to just put into the Unity project folder, you can just drag it in. You can also just save it in the actual file structure of your project. So if you click inside the project area and do show and explorer, that'll show you the actual directory that the project is sitting in. So if you just put anything there, it'll also show up in Unity. So if I just like copied something and then paste it into there, that was something I already did. Let's do this one. So if I just paste it into there and then I click back in Unity, it'll automatically detect it. So hopefully that answers your question. Great. As in like the sequence of images, like you want to make them into an animation. So the way I showed you how to do that is with all the images being in one image. So it's like a sprite sheet. Doing it with multiple images requires manually going into the Unity animation system and actually setting keyframes where the image is this at this keyframe, change the image at the next keyframe, change the image at the next keyframe. And we'll go over that when we do the actual animation lecture in 2 weeks, I think. But if you wanted to just do it the way I did it, you could open up GIMP and make a really, really big image, drag all those in certain ways, and then open up the sprite editor and divide them up. Which if you want, I can try to show you how to do that. So let's say, well, probably should, because it's not the right way to do it, because it'll end up tanking. It's like it'll be like a 4,000 by 4,000 image. But if I do like, if I take my smiley and I want to make a sprite sheet out of him, I can, so I know the dimensions of the smiley. I know he's 64 by 64. And I know I want to have 5 frames in my animation. So what I do is I just make a 64 height and then the width 64 times 5. And I could also make it like a square. I can make it, well, actually, no, I can't, because but you could distribute it with the height too. But I'll just make it width-wise, 64 by 5. And then do transparency back. And now I can take this one image, select everything with the box select tool, which is the easiest way to select things in GIMP. So I just select the box, drag from the top corner down to the bottom until I've selected everything that I want to. Control C to copy, Control V to paste. And then I just want to line these up. So that they line exactly where my borders are. Now you notice I don't actually have my grid on, so I can't actually see where my borders are. So I'll do View, Show Grid. And so each one of these squares is 16 by 16. So that means 4 of these squares is 64. So I want to keep these within 64. And I'll just keep pasting. And just for the sake of time, we'll say it's a 3-frame animation. And you don't actually need to fill in the rest, right? Because you're just going to tell Unity to ignore the rest. So I've got 3 frames here. I'm going to save it and call it Smiley End. What do you mean by that, Woody? Oh, I see. When we import it into Unity.
Yeah, in Unity, I think you can grab a bunch of images and then drag them in, but it's not like guaranteed like this is.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So like I could do this and, I don't know. They have to be sprites maybe.
Yeah, I think they have to be sprites.
That's totally, that answers this question way better than what I was trying to do. That's real. Like I can just select this and like this and then. No.
Maybe they have to be, oh, they might have to be part of the same sprite sheet though.
Yeah, I think that's what
Is
it
it-
is.
I
Oh,
know you
no,
can
no,
do-
it worked. It worked.
Oh,
I just have to not select the actual sprite. I just select the files. That's awesome.
oh, yeah.
All right, so that's way better, Michael, than what I was trying to do. So you could do what I was trying to do, which is make a big sprite sheet out of the small images and then just do what we did with the star. But you can also just keep things in sequence in the editor. Or I guess you don't have to. Just Well, yeah, you might have to put them all adjacent so you can shift select them. But select multiple images and then just drag them in and they'll actually make a new animation for you. And call this something. I guess that works, right? That's pretty cool. Yeah, there you go. That's pretty cool. Okay, so you probably need to set those images as sprites in the import settings. So if you select them in your project, then look at your inspector, you'll see that their texture type right now is probably default. If you set those to sprites and then hit apply, it should work. Awesome.